Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Hello and welcome to another episode of Living the Dream with Curveball. I am your host, Curveball, and today I am joined by a certified nutrition chef that helps individuals cook and eat healthy without any restrictions or diet. So, we're going to talk to her about her story today and let you know how she got to this point and why she does what she does. Shelley, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Curveball, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you today.
Absolutely. Why don't you start by giving the audience a little bit of background about yourself, maybe where you're from, just anything that you would want them to know before we get started?
Sure. So, my name is Shelley Loving, and I live in the North Texas area. I live halfway between Dallas and the Oklahoma border on a 55-acre ranch with my husband. We have three grown boys, but they're gone. So, we are really enjoying a post children life. We have three dogs, and we're both entrepreneurs. I am a certified nutrition chef, and my husband is a contractor by trade. So, yeah, that's me in a nutshell. When I'm not helping people get healthy with food, I usually I like to go to the movies. I like to be outside. I love to walk. That's probably my favorite thing to do. And we love to travel. So yeah, that's just kind of me on the personal side.
So, real quick, what's your favorite movie and what's your most favorite place that you have traveled to?
Ooh, those are good questions. Let's see. My favorite movie, which a lot of people haven't heard of it, but it's with Meg Ryan and Kevin Kline, and it's called French Kiss. And it's from I think it's mid to late 90s. Highly recommend you watch it. It has one of the best one-liners in it. So that's why I love that movie so much. And then my favorite place that I've traveled, I haven't gone abroad. I've only gone north and south. My husband and I love the beach. So we do the Caribbean a lot. We just got back from St. John, but I think my favorite place so far has been the British Virgin Islands because we got our own catamaran and sailed all around the islands for 12 days. My husband was the captain, I guess you could call him. And that was probably my favorite trip I've ever been on.
Sounds like fun. Well,
Yes.
why don't you tell us what got you into being a certified nutrition chef and explain to people who might not know what exactly that is?
Sure. So on 2014, it was Super Bowl Sunday, and my husband was starting to feel really bad. We thought he had the flu, and so this was one of the years that flu was killing people. And so I said, "Honey, we need to get you some Tamiflu, and we need to get on top of this so you don't end up in the hospital." He's like, "Okay." And 3 hours later, we go to the doctor. It's a Sunday, right? And so 3 hours later, we're at one of those doc in the box places. And by the time we get there, the nurse said, "Mr. Loving, do you have any chest pain?" And my husband said, "Well, yeah, I do." And then my jaw dropped to the floor because we never even thought heart attack because my husband was a healthy 41-year-old male who had no signs of a heart attack. And sure enough, he was having a massive heart attack. He had 100% blockage in his left circumflex artery. They call it the widowmaker because you don't get the typical signs. You don't get the arm numbness and you don't get the chest pain until the very end. So it's pretty scary deal. So they rushed him to the hospital, lights and sirens, and they had to put a stent in. And he's a perfect bill of health today. So he is alive and well. But the doctor did grab me by the shoulders after surgery and said, "Mrs. Loving, your husband is a very lucky man." So had it not been Super Bowl Sunday and he was just driving around in his truck doing construction work on a weekday, he may not be here today. Divine intervention and God is good. And I knew right then that what we were doing had to change with what we were eating. So I got on this like fierce mission on Google and I just was doing heart healthy diet. And I didn't honestly believe what I was reading. Some of it sounded like it made sense, but my gut feeling was telling me some of this stuff is not, it just doesn't seem accurate. So after doing a ton of digging, I was so passionate about getting him healthy again that I went to two schools over the next 3 years and got two nutrition certifications. And now my husband has the cardiovascular system of a 33-year-old. It was all done through diet and lifestyle. And what was so weird, curveball, is that I was healing my husband through changing the foods that he was eating, but I was also healing myself. And I didn't know that I was sick too. So I had all of these little symptoms. So he had this big symptom, right? He had a heart attack. And it's obvious he needed to make some changes. But I had these little symptoms that a lot of people deal with every single day, and they don't realize that it can be food related. So I had headaches and fatigue, brain fog, joint pain, constipation. I had all of these things going on in my life that I've just always dealt with. And when I cleaned up my diet and made very small changes in my food choices, I couldn't believe how much better I felt. And all of these symptoms just went away. So I thought, if I can help my husband get back to complete health and I can heal myself not knowing I was sick, I had to do this as much as I could and help as many people as I could, show them that just making very small changes in the foods that they eat is going to have long-term benefits to their health. So that's why I do what I do.
So, what made you go to two different schools? Did you go to one and realize, oh, I need to go somewhere else? Or did you figure one was better than the other? Why not just one
No,
school?
that's a great question, and that your first guess was correct. So I went to the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, and they talk about all of the pillars of health: mental, spiritual, relationships, and food. And I loved it. But when I was done, I was really yearning for more food information, and that's when I stumbled upon the Academy of Culinary Nutrition, and that's when I really got my hands in the kitchen and really learned the why behind the foods. So I love the two schools that I went to, and they served two complete different purposes. So that's why I call myself a nutrition chef. My technical title is a culinary nutrition expert, but nobody knows what that means. So I just call it a nutrition chef. It helps people understand, like, I don't actually cook in a restaurant. I do food education and inspire and encourage other people to cook just a little bit healthier for themselves.
And speaking of that, how do you do your food education to inspire people? Let's go ahead and plug your classes and get into all the details of that.
Sure. So my business is 100% online. I do a lot of free content in every social media you can imagine. I'm posting something healthy food related every day. I do recipe videos. I do food information. I do blogs, which is all great and dandy. But what I do love, where my passion lies, is two different areas. So my first one is I have something called the Recipe Makeover, and I launch it about 3 times a year. And all it is, curveball, is just online videos of how to cook healthy. I do endless recipes. I talk about the why behind the recipe. So as I'm cooking, I think it's important to tell people, why did I choose an ingredient? Or why should we eliminate a certain ingredient instead of this ingredient? So there's always the why behind my videos, which I think kind of sets up, it makes it more relatable to people. Yes, a recipe is great, and reading a recipe and following it is great. But when you know the why behind why you're eating what you're eating, it makes you more inclined to want to cook that. So that's why I created the Recipe Makeover. And then the second part to my business is I do virtual corporate cooking classes. So I offer corporate cooking education classes for two different reasons. One, it kind of goes along with wellness programs with that companies are trying to keep their employees healthy. And so that's a really good. And then the other one is employee engagement. They're looking for something fun because everybody's working from home right now. And these classes are super fun. I get in the kitchen, I make jokes, but I also have the healthy piece to it. So they kind of get the best of both worlds. They're entertained and they also learn something about healthy eating.
So, what are some of the companies that you've worked with that people might recognize?
Let's see. My two most recent large corporations that are global is Globe Life Insurance. They're pretty big. And then Ameriprise Financial. They're a financial company and they have 10,000 agents all over the US. I also have down in the South, we have a bank called Texas Capital Bank. They're a wonderful customer of mine. So yeah, those are probably my three, the ones that I do the most for. I have a long list of companies, but some of them are smaller.
Why don't you give us a example of a recipe that you might cook to change the ingredients to be more healthier? Just kind of give us an example of
Sure.
one.
So I know you've heard of the Russell Stover's chocolate, right? And they have these turtles, with the caramel and the pecans. I'm sure you've had one in your lifetime.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I make
Absolutely.
a healthy version of that because everyone, I think One of the biggest thing, my soapbox, is that I tell people it's all about balance. It is okay to have sweet things. It is okay to have things when you crave them. It's the ingredients that you choose is where it makes a difference. So my healthy version of a turtle is it's so easy. Like you could write, it has four ingredients. You basically take some dates and you soak them in hot water so they get really soft. Of course, you want to take the seed out of them, and then you throw them in a blender and mix them up, and it forms this like gooey ball, right? And so then you just pick it off into little circles and roll them with your hand and put them on a plate and just smash them down so that they're going to make that flat turtle shape, and stick them in the freezer for a little bit so they'll harden just a little bit. Then you take them out, smash a pecan in them, and you dip them in melted dark chocolate. And then you sprinkle sea salt on top of them, put them back in the freezer and let them freeze up. And you will not believe that there's no caramel in it. It tastes just like a Russell Stover's turtle. That's probably my most popular recipe.
So the only thing you did from the regular recipe is take the caramel out?
Yeah, and I also use dark chocolate. So dark chocolate is actually really good for us. It's loaded with antioxidants, and we need antioxidants in our body to help build healthy cells and fight things off like virus and disease. And so the other one, the store-bought one, has milk chocolate, which is loaded with sugar, has a lot of sugar in the milk chocolate. So, and sugar causes a lot of inflammation in our body. So I choose to use dates instead of sugar.
And what made you take the caramel
Because
out?
it's loaded with sugar as well and a lot of corn syrup. And so it's just really hard on our body. And sugar causes a lot of problems, not inflammation. And, it also is a pillar from diabetes and things like that. So I just try to keep white refined sugar and corn syrup out of all my recipes because there's so many things that we can switch it up with that still taste absolutely delicious.
Absolutely. Well, do you have any upcoming projects that people need to know about? The end of the year is coming. It's about to be 2021.
Right?
Do you have any things coming up
2021.
that people
I
need to
think
know about?
2021 is going to be all of our best years yet. 2020 was so rough on us. And so January and February are big months for me because I know everyone thinks about eating healthier and I like to keep that momentum going. So I am launching the recipe makeover. At the end of January, I'm doing a free online kind of a masterclass. And that's a 5-day event and it's all online and it's free on Facebook. It's inside my private Facebook group called The Healthy Hub with Shelley. And then in the first week of February, I launched the recipe makeover. And you can learn more about that at shelleycanhelp.com.
Have you ever thought about putting all this content into a book, or
Yes, sir.
do you feel like the online course is the most effective way? Because I've heard people say that. Yeah, I thought about writing a book, but the online courses are more effective.
I
What
want to
about
do
yourself?
both. I do have a 5-year goal to write a recipe cookbook, but it's going to be like an interactive cookbook. So think food journal meets cookbook. It's going to be one where people can write notes in the recipe margin and change out their ingredients if they want and take notes on the nutrition behind the ingredients. So it's going to be like an interactive cookbook, and that's in my 5-year plan. So stay tuned.
Absolutely. Listeners, definitely stay tuned. Are there any other topics that you would like to touch on that we haven't touched on as far as nutrition and eating
Well, a
healthy?
lot of people do not know this, but if you could take one thing away from me, this is the pillar for which I stand in my business, is that really watch your intake of inflammatory foods. So, inflammation, the chronic inflammation, not the kind like not the acute inflammation where when you sprain your wrist it swells up. That's acute inflammation. I'm talking about chronic inflammation where your body is in this fight or flight mode all the time. What happens is inflammation is the root of most disease. So when our bodies get chronically inflamed, it raises a white flag and it says, hey, I can't fight this inflammation anymore. So then our cells get weak. When our cells get weak, that's when disease just attacks us. Disease preys on weak cells, disease, virus, sickness. And so it's our job to lower the inflammation in our body as much as we can. And one of the biggest ways that we can do that is to increase the anti inflammatory foods that we eat and decrease the inflammatory foods that we eat. And then we have this perfect little medium of an anti inflammatory diet and lifestyle.
Absolutely. Throw out your full contact information, website, social media. That way people can connect with you if they would like to take part in your
Sure, I would
courses.
love to. So my website is shelleycanhelp.com. And I am Shelley Can Help on all social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and what's the one? Instagram. And then if you want to email me, if you ever have any questions about food, I love to help people in an email. So you can email me at info@shelleycanhelp.com.
Absolutely. Do you have any newsletters that people can subscribe to? I know there's been a couple of sites to where you can subscribe and they'll send you out just different types of recipes or tidbits or whatever. You have
I sure
anything like
do.
that?
I have an email newsletter. I send one email a week, sometimes two if I'm feeling inspired, and it's always either a recipe or food information, nutritional tips and things like that. So yes, I do. I send out an email once a week, sometimes twice. So you can find that at shelleycanhelp.com, and on the main page just scroll to the bottom and it'll say join my newsletter.
Absolutely. So several ways to connect with Shelley. Ladies and gentlemen, Shelley Loving. Shelley, thank you so much for joining me today. And listeners, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Shelley.
much, Curveball, for having me.
For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.